I tell my kids my first job was like 250 or 280 bucks a month. That's how it was my first, but I was so excited. I tell them that you never work for money. You always work to learn. And I learned so much from that experience working at a bank. You learn who makes money. You learn who has it and who doesn't. You learn how people behave, how people sell, how people feel about money, how they manage their money, how businesses are run, the businesses that have strong cash flow, businesses that don't have strong cash flow, good managers versus bad managers. There's so much to learn because you could see the bank accounts. There's nowhere to hide, if you will. You see the financials. There's no marketing or posturing or branding or anything. You see the real deal. So it was an amazing experience.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to the BizDad podcast. Today, I am super excited to talk to Jay Bourgana. I have no idea how it took us this long to get you on because, we're in like a daily chat about dad stuff and an entrepreneur group and Go Abundance together and all the stuff. So I think it's a naturally fitting thing to have you jump in on here. So I'm really looking forward to chatting with you, Jay. If you can you go ahead and introduce yourself? Tell us about who you are, tell us about your family, and then tell us about your business.
Yeah, my name is Jay Bourgana. I live in Parkland, Florida, close to Boca in South Florida. I'm 46-year-old. I'm married. Jennifer, I've been married for 12 years, been together for 13, and we have two beautiful children. Isabel is 10 and Jack is 8.
Nice. Very good. So boy, 12 years, you got started right away, 2 kids, within the first 4 years. That's my wife and I, it took us 4 years to have our first kiddo. And then it was every 4 years after that. It was like, what the heck? So it took us forever to have all 3 of our kids. But
now we got married, 12 months, 14 months after we met. So we got engaged 12 months, at the anniversary. And then we got married about a couple months later, and we had Isabel 10 months later.
That's awesome. Yeah. Well, when you know, right? When you know it's ready, then make it happen.
Yeah.
Can you? I'll come back to the family stuff here in a minute, but tell us a little bit about your business as well.
Yeah. So I'm technically just unretired. I sold the company back in 2018. Moved to Hawaii. Spent about 4 years drinking Mai Tais and margaritas on the beach. And then until I got tired of that, and then I decided that I needed to get serious again and be more productive. So I moved to the mainland, and now we're doing business acquisitions. We buy small businesses anywhere between $1.5 million in revenue to 5 to 10 million in revenue, and the goal is to consolidate them and either hold for forever or sell at some point.
Awesome. Yeah. Do you target specific types of small businesses or just about any type?
Yeah. So I have like 3 categories right now. Anything in the home services. So landscaping, irrigation, plumbing, and then anything in the wealth management space, and anything in commercial services. So commercial electrical, commercial anything. So that's, roofing, remediation. Yeah.
Nice. All right. So your background, I want to dig into that a little bit. You have a very interesting background, but I always ask everybody about their dad and kind of what it was like growing up with their dad and what they got from him and what they didn't get from him. So if you can, let's rewind all the way to the beginning of Jay Bourgana's life, and like what was it like for you growing up outside of the country, of course, where you're born and raised. So let's hear a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I was born in Morocco in the late 70s. So we know what was happening in the world in the late 70s, massive inflation, all kinds of like economic turmoil. My parents got married probably a couple of years before that, a year or 2 years before that. They were young and they didn't know what they were doing. So, which ended up, as soon as the kid got in the mix, everything kind of blew up, from their financial situation to their stress to everything. So they got divorced. My mother and I went to live with my grandpa, and 3-4 years later, my parents came back together and had my sister, and then the same kind of like pattern again. 3-4 years later, they got divorced again, and yeah, so essentially I kind of was living between homes, my whole childhood. And I had like massive financial uncertainty, massive kind of life uncertainty that made it where early on I was trying to figure out how can I take control essentially of my life, how can I find my way through life and not have this massive overhang that I could be homeless on any day. And especially the second time when my parents divorced, my grandfather passed away around the same time. And so he was kind of like the core father figure for the family, which made it a lot harder because now my grandma and her kids had their own financial uncertainty. So they didn't want to take on another burden of, two more children. So I had this whole kind of like, awareness of like not being wanted essentially in that situation and not and not having that financial that life certainty. I'm not going to say just financial, but all of it, all the basic needs, if you will. So early on, I remember 6-7-year-old, I'm asking people around me what they did, how much they made, if they rented or owned, how much is their rent, how much is their water bill, how much is their electrical bill. Wow. And it's fascinating because you ask enough people, you start noticing the patterns of the people who have their act together and people who don't, and people who know and people who don't, and the majority of people just don't know. So early on, I came to the realization that no one knows anything. So that's essentially kind of like my base case for everything in life is that no one knows anything. And I start with essentially basic rules, basic fundamental questions. What are we doing here? What's the goal? And I just build it from there. So it was a great, it was hard to learn to know that, but it was a very valuable lesson for sure, because it frees you up to be more creative, frees you up to explore more, to explore beyond the boundaries of your family, your neighborhood, your city. It allows you to kind of like just roam a lot freer and be creative in the type of people that you seek information or advice from.
Man, that is, I mean, at 6, 8, 10 years old, I was riding my bike around everywhere, never asking anybody anything, right? It was just me and my buddies out to rule the world, shooting BB guns at each other and stuff, So, like to hear that those are the types of questions you were asking, like, were you around adults that talked to you about that? Or was it just your like understanding of the uncertainty in which you lived that led you to ask those questions?
Yeah, it's more of the latter. Just understanding the situation, understanding. My mom was a kind of like a stress basket, so she kind of made it even worse for us. Yeah, but it's good and bad. Like everything is good and bad. It's bad from one sense because it created a lot of too much cortisol for a young person, but it was good because it kind of lit a fire under me to actually figure it out and figure it out sooner than I needed to. So I almost like had a head start. As opposed to my cousins and, all my family on thinking about these things and becoming, a little bit more responsible, a little bit more of an adult, and just take responsibility for myself, if you will.
I mean, I'm still intrigued and want to keep walking down that road. Yeah. That's odd for me.
There's a ton of lessons, so I'm happy to explore it, whichever you want. I tell my kids this stuff, so we talk about this every day. Yeah.
Oh, I would imagine. Yeah. Like, and we'll get into it on your morning breakfast meetings that you guys have. We'll definitely get into some of that. But I just don't understand. Like, so I saw like my parents. There was a lot of paycheck to paycheck as I was growing up, and I just it was always, oh man, something broke on the car. I have no idea how we're going to get this fixed, type of stuff. And it was just but for me, it was like, well, I mean, I'm I'm 10, ain't nothing I can do about it. And I didn't so it never registered in my brain. But then I'm listening to you, like I'll sit back and listen to a couple times that you've talked about the various different markets and how you delve deep into the market and understand what's going on like the different ways of like how credit's being utilized in America and where debt's going and all this stuff. And you'll dig into all of that stuff on a micro and macro level. Apparently something has been there for a long time for you to want to do all of this stuff. But sparking that fire, I'm just curious, is it something maybe in school? Have you ever sat back to really say, okay, well, like a normal, and I'm not calling you abnormal necessarily, but a normal 6, 7, 8-year-old doesn't sit there and think, okay, I see what's going on around me. Let me figure out how I can make it better for myself later. Like that, that's intriguing. So, how do you think you walked down that path to get there?
It's very tough. I think maybe I have a little bit more, a little bit better quality memory, I guess. Like I just pick up stuff. Like yep. I was one of those kids that's always listening. So I remember in kindergarten, they will ask us to take naps. And I remember that the school teachers were talking about, the diet advice. And one of the ladies was telling the other one that dark chocolate was good for you. And then I'm like, in the middle in the house with my mom and then with her friends, and she was talking, and I jumped in the conversation telling them about all the diet advice that the teachers were talking about. and so I'm like, how the hell do you know this? And then I'm just listening to stuff. So maybe I'm kind of like that person, just absorbs a lot of stuff. So yeah. I remember kids 2 years old shouldn't remember things. Yeah. But I remember someone had asked me one time, what is your first ever memory? Which is an interesting question. And it's like, what's your first memory? And I'm like, my first memory was my parents fighting over what type of beans my mother had bought. And she bought the slightly more expensive than the ones that, she should have bought. And I remember that. So as a 2-year-old, because I remember the place where we were, and I remember that I know by that age that's where I was. And a 2-year-old shouldn't have a memory like that, and shouldn't have a memory at all. And so maybe it's because there was a lot of emotion attached to that experience. So my mother had a lot of stress, or my father had a lot of stress, so that absorbed on me, and so I remember it. So I'm not sure. And maybe the fact that, my mother was, again, like I was telling you, it was a stress case. So she made everything more accentuated than it should. And that created these memories in my head of these moments. So it might be in that, but it might be a combination of both.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, especially if that is your first memory, and that's kind of where your brain goes to is tying those. Because even that very first memory has something to do with finances, right? Yes. And like the numbers behind it. So the very first memory, like for me, my very first memory that I remember is riding my big wheel around our house in Detroit when we lived in Detroit when I was a kid. Nice. We moved there when I think I was 2. I think I was 2 when we moved to Detroit. And I remember riding my big wheel, and I wore that thing out, and I had this big flat spot on it, so it'd go clunk, 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 clunk every time I rode it. But that was my first memory. Not like, oh, I wonder what the cost of beans was. Like, right? So now all of a sudden, you're sitting here thinking about the trading of rice and beans in various different markets, and I'm over here going, "Wait, I wonder if my son's dirt bike needs to be upgraded." It's very, very different thoughts. But yes. So kind of walk me through. So it sounds like you were maybe, depending on the math and how everything worked out, somewhere around 10 or so when your parents split up the second time. Right. So walk me through kind of what it was like after that. Like, your grandfather passed away, so your only real patriarch is now gone. How does the transition end up happening eventually to move to America? Or what? It's really interesting because it kind of goes into you and I, I've heard the conversations around having your trust ready, having your financials cleaned up, sharing that information with your spouse, making sure that they know where things are and all that stuff. So my grandfather was old school, and same thing. My grandmother was not literate at all, and they had 13 kids.
And when he died, they didn't know anything about anything.
Yeah.
And so they had to figure it out on their own. So that essentially what it did, it kind of increased the level of stress that they had and the level of like sense of like scarcity, if you will. Even though they may have been okay, but they felt way more scared when that happened than they would otherwise. So which essentially impacted, us who are these new mouths that are coming into my house to eat, to consume what limited resources we have. And so it created this sense of like, all right, my grandmother has, wasn't happy about it, and neither one. And so I had to kind of like, you see, like every day you kind of like sense that, oh, you're not wanted here, and then you needed to go and figure it out, somewhere. And so early on, and I mean, you gotta focus, you gotta do as well as you could at school, and as soon as you could work, you gotta work, and anywhere you can make some money, you gotta make money, and yeah, and I mean, you're just buying your time until that moment where you're gonna be independent and kind of like go and do your thing.
Yeah. How long did that take? I should say, what kind of things did you do in the middle there of like, trying to find work and trying to make money before you were able to finally go out and do your stuff? What were you actually doing in that time frame?
Yeah, so you couldn't work back, the economy was not that great. Unemployment was very high over there. So you had to kind of like buy stuff, sell stuff, do little hustles here and there, and go help up with this and help with that. And then I had people that I knew who did some distribution for products. So you go, carry boxes, fill up trucks, whatever it takes, whether it is labor or trade or whatever, you just do that. So as soon as I could, whatever I could do to make a couple bucks, I did. And but it was amazing experience. I mean, I learned so much. I learned how to sell. I learned how to distribution works. We learn networks. You learn cost of things. Who buys what. You see stuff that's being sold that you never thought anyone would buy. It is fascinating, and so I wouldn't trade that experience for anything. It was just amazing. I wouldn't want it for my kids, but I wish they had, they had a way for them to learn these things.
Yeah. I'm sure there is something, or sure there are some things that you're doing to try to provide the same, at least, value sets and understanding of what's going on in there. So I'm looking forward to digging into that. How did you go from? Talk to me about the transition from there to when did you actually come to the States?
Yeah, so right after high school, I started looking for work. Somehow, some way, the banks at that period of time, because unemployment was high, they started in hiring kids out of high school as opposed to hiring people in college, because if they hire people in college, they have to pay them a certain amount. There's a minimum wage for college degrees. So I ended up getting like part of this cohort of young guys that came into to the bank, and so it was a great opportunity. I worked there for like 5-6 years. I did everything from consumer banking to business banking to international trade. I was very curious. I was the first guy in, last guy out. They gave me the keys to the bank like within the first, couple of months, because I was always there early complaining why no one is here. And I was excited. And, I tell my kids my first job was like $280 a month or something like that, 250 or $280 a month. That's how it was my first. But I was so excited. I keep telling them, that you never work for money. You always work to learn. And I learned so much from that experience, working at a bank. You learn who makes money, how, you learn who has it and who doesn't. You learn how people behave, how people sell, how people feel about money, how they, manage their money. how businesses are run, the businesses that have strong cash flow, businesses that don't have strong cash flow, good managers versus bad managers. It's there's so much learning because you could see the bank accounts. Like there's nowhere to hide, if you will. You see the financials. There's no marketing or posturing or branding or anything. You see the real deal. So it was an amazing experience. So that's why, for me, didn't matter how much I was making. Obviously, it was important because I wasn't, I wanted to become independent. But as long as I keep my burn rate low, I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because it's the same thing I tell people when they're looking at underwriting, apartments. Like the only thing in this deal that won't lie to you is the numbers.
Yeah,
right. Because numbers don't lie. Like
right.
I can even write it in the paperwork. The numbers will lie, but once you get the bank statements, like those things don't lie. Like the numbers, they're there. Where is the bottom line on this particular property? Right. What's going on with it?
Exactly.
And I'm definitely putting an asterisk next to that. Work to learn. You're not working for money. You're working to learn. And
yes.
I very much was at the beginning, like my very first job, I'm like 90% certain I was just working for money. That was it. That's all I thought about was buying that, that new anti-skip Discman, right? Like I'm tired of my Walkman. I want the anti-skip Discman, so I'm working very hard for that first paycheck to do that, right? But that was it. Like that was all my brain was thinking about. So the fact that you were on this trend already, which is probably why you started so early in the business side of the house too, and started doing all of that the way you do. But so after that first job working at a bank, where did you go to from there?
Yeah, so the whole time I worked, so I was working for a French bank, and the whole time I'm like trying to figure out how to get out of Morocco and go somewhere else where there's more opportunity. In Morocco, it's a great country. It's beautiful. It's great people. But, at the time, especially, this was like mid 90s, it was tough to kind of make it. It was, there was a ceiling. And then just the world in general was going through its own kind of challenges. So because I was working for a French bank, I was able to go to Europe quite a bit and explore and see what opportunities are there. And I was there late 90s, so economically they were not in good shape. And so I decided, okay, Europe is not the place. And I was in France, I was in Belgium, went to the UK. So I decided, okay, I'm going to come to the United States. I had to pick between East Coast, New York and the East Coast, and Orange County, California. I picked the weather. So I landed in Orange County, California.
Okay. Awesome. And that was in the late 90s, you said?
No, this was early 2000s. So about 2002.
Okay, so shortly after the .com bubble and all of that fun stuff. So, like, what were
we're going into the war, Iraq War, and all that good stuff. Yeah,
exactly. So you're coming here as an immigrant from a I guess mostly Islamic country.
Yeah.
Right after 9/11.
Yes.
In California.
Yeah.
Shortly after the .com bubble. So we have all of these things coming in together. What was that like for you, kind of coming into this new culture, and what was the culture like to you?
Yeah. It's funny. I didn't really think about it much. I was just excited to be here. It was something new. It was a new experience. It was new. Everything was new. It was funny because one of my first memories being here, and I just landed like at 7 p.m. at LAX, 7 or 8. And then by 3 in the morning, I was scrubbing pots in the kitchen, trying to make some money. And I remember I was like, man, I was a banker just like 2 weeks ago. And now my hands are like, with the soap and the hot, and they're all white. And it's like, what the hell has just happened? And then, it's fun. And I was thinking at the same time, it was like, I was excited because, I'm gonna whatever it takes. I'm here, and I heard that people had 2 jobs, and I come from a place where you could barely get one. And I asked, I was like, "Oh, is this legal?" And it's like, "Oh yeah, you can have more than one. Can I have 3?" I was like, "Yeah, I'll have 5." It's like, so my first couple of years, I had like 5 jobs, and I would just go from place to place. and dude, I was happy as a clam. I didn't care. And so whatever it takes.
That's awesome. I mean, it's one thing I gather a lot when I talk to immigrants, especially like they come from such a different mindset, a different place of,
Yeah.
like I feel like Americans, we kind of expect a certain thing, like we're entitled to a certain thing. And it's like, no, you're freaking not. Right.
Yeah.
And then when you like immigrants, they come in and they're just like, no, like this is like, I'm going to earn my keep. I'm going to work my butt off. I'm going to do all these things. My wife is first generation American. Her mom is Cuban and her dad is Spanish.
Yeah.
So, my mother-in-law, fleeing Cuba when she was 17 years old with her mom, like running away from trying to get away from Fidel. And, so they've got such a different respect and understanding for what they need to go through. And then, I've been to, I don't know, somewhere around 20, 25 countries at this point, somewhere around there, lived in quite a few of those. And it's like, man, the understanding that you have when you leave this country and what's actually here, like this is an exciting, wonderful place to live that has some amazing opportunities. And man, are you proof of that?
I think immigrants have an unfair advantage, and I always felt that, especially here in the United States, because they have a completely different experience. Growing up somewhere else, and then coming here to this, this other experience. So they have something to compare it to, and there's a stark contrast, and they can see all the advantages of being here. They can see everything. Like the person who's been here their whole life, they don't see that. They only see the disadvantages. They only, they're living in their own kind of like view of the world, which is very hard. I mean, I even feel like bad. And I mean, like, if I was living in Africa and I'm looking forward to go into Europe or go into America, someone here, where are they looking forward to? They can't have nowhere to go. If you're not happy here, they have nowhere to go. And so I feel it's definitely an unfair advantage for an immigrant.
So that's funny because I look at that almost the other way around. Like it's an unfair advantage for the American, but they have such an egotistical view on what they deserve because of what they've seen in front of them. Like they have all advantages that are possible. They didn't have to go through the hardships of seeing some of the things that some of the immigrants have seen and have to do all of these things. Like they've got it all right there. All they got to do is step out of their own way, get out of their own head, and just knock it off. Realize that you're not the center of this world, but you can make a difference in the world and go make a difference in your own life. But
absolutely,
no, that's why the world needs to give it.
That's why, to me, I really appreciate the Israelis with their culture of travel. Like they, how all the Israelis have to go to the military for 2 to 3 years, and then they all kind of usually keep their salary, whatever, till the end, and then they collect all that money and then they go travel, and it's just part of their culture. Where young people right out of the military, they usually just high schoolers or maybe have a couple of years of college that they studied during, while in the military. And then they just go travel for 2-3 years and then they come back and then they choose what they're going to do in college. So they're not going straight from home to high school to college, not knowing what they want to be in life or who they are. They're actually going to go explore the world and see what's out there and then come back with an idea of who they are, what they're good at, and then what they're going to choose. So I think that's an amazing thing. That's why you find that Israel has like the highest highest percentage of entrepreneurs in the world per capita, or highest corporations per capita in the world. Or you find out that in the stock market, in the U.S. stock market, there are more Israeli companies than all the other non-U.S. companies combined, which is unbelievable, and it's all coming from the fact that young people go to the military for 2-3 years, and then they go travel for 2-3 years, and then they come back and figure it out.
Yeah, I think since this is a dad podcast, I'll mention this part too. I think that there is such a huge focus on family in Israel as well. Like, family is everything. And when you have something to root that to and know that like and your name means a lot, your family means a lot. Like they still sit down and have Shabbat together, and they're going through, like, I mean, it is a huge part of their culture, is keeping that family together. And I just recently, it was like today, and now I'm going to forget the stat, but it was like 52% or something like that. It might have even been higher than that. Don't think that having focusing on like the family values, family system in America is one of the most important things for our future. And it's like, you don't have a future as a country without families. Like, it just, like, there is no future for a country without families. Like, I don't understand how people don't see that. But to me, I mean, it's one of those, like, when you have that already tied into your culture, and you're like, hey, family is super important, service is super important, and then going out and learning more about other countries and cultures is also super important. And like, when you add all of that together, I mean, I guess it's really not a wonder that that's where we have a lot of those, Israeli companies inside of there. So it makes sense to me.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So let's fast forward 10 years or so, I guess it would be, from the time you got here to the time you got married. What were you doing in those 10 years before meeting your wife?
Yeah, so I spent some time in manufacturing. I worked for a company, an Israeli company actually, that manufactured health and beauty products, food products. Here, it was manufactured in China and sold here in the United States at Walmart, Target, you name it. And so I was in operations. I spent a couple years here in the United States in the supply chain logistics. And then I went to China for a couple-week project, and I ended up staying there for like 5 years.
Wow.
And I ran all essentially it was kind of a turnaround situation. And I ran as a 1 million square foot facility with 3,000 people manufacturing all kinds of products. And it was an amazing experience. I mean, I've never ran manufacturing. So it was kind of first principles day. What does this thing do? What does this facility do? What is it doing now? What do we need it to do in order to make money? And then, okay, let's figure out a way to, redo the process, move the people, talk to suppliers, technology to improve it. And literally just the first principle thing. And I was just turning around one department at a time until we turned around the whole place. And, increase profitability, productivity, and all that stuff. And it was amazing. We had a good, 3-4 year run. I'd say about a really strong 3-year run until 2008 happened. And all our, a lot of our clients filed some kind of bankruptcy chapter to not pay us and not pay their vendors. And we couldn't pay our vendors or our people, so we had to shut down. And it was almost like it was close to $1 billion revenue company. And we were done within 90 days of Bank of America taking their $100 million line of credit. We were done. And I had to hand the keys to the landlord. And so that was really interesting because I was kind of like at the top of the world. I was the C-suite, and I was running my own show, and I, had all this success. But it really taught me that, working for other people does not give you any security whatsoever. And I'm wired since I was a child too. Like we talked about seeking security or seeking freedom. And so immediately I came to the realization that if I don't, own, I don't own the business, I don't own my destiny. So so I had to figure it out post 2008. A lot of the guys that I worked with went to different companies, and most of those companies were going through some type of challenge because we were post 2007-8. So so in the new, I was kind of like the turnaround guy. I developed that reputation. So I would get called to help on a production facility or distribution center, and then that person has multiple facilities. So I'll spend 3 to 6 months in each facility. And then I spent about 4 or 5 years just traveling the country and the world, just doing this, just turning around, operations and fixing businesses. And it was fun. I enjoyed it until I kind of got tired of like living in hotels.
Yeah.
And by then, I'd spent almost like 10 years living in the hotel between China and this period. So I decided to come back and just chill for a bit and find a place. And
Mhm.
I was talking to friends, and they were telling me how it was around 2011, yeah. They were telling me about how real estate was a good hedge for inflation because we had printed a lot of money post
Mhm.
2008, and there was going to be everybody was expecting massive amount of inflation, and the friend of mine who was a CFO was like, "Oh, you got to buy, don't rent." So I started looking into buying. At that moment, I've never bought anything real estate related. So I bought a first place in Long Beach, California, and then I saw that the day I closed, or the day before I closed, someone next to me had sold the same exact property for something like $70,000 or $80,000 more because it was
Mm.
flip, and I was
Yeah.
buying. I just bought a bank owned property,
Yeah.
and I'm like, oh my god, that's like so much value was created
Yeah.
so quickly, and then now my property is worth that much. So I'm like,
Yeah.
oh wow, okay, interesting. So I fixed it up. I spent something like $20,000 to make it even nicer than the other one, and I felt like, oh my god, I'm a genius. I figured this real estate thing. So I got curious about learning more about real estate, and around the same time, that's when I met Jen, and we moved in together. But yeah, that's when I started looking into real estate, and at the time there wasn't a lot of education around real estate
Mhm.
investing, or at least I wasn't exposed to it. And so instead of learning about real estate investing, I went and got my real estate license, and I got sucked into real estate sales,
Mhm.
and having you know being with someone, and then now kind of like now we're serious and engaged, and so I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, let's just do this, and so I give it a year to see how it goes. And 18 months into it, around the same time, um, actually I started real estate at the same time as I got married, actually
Yeah.
2012, late 2012, and then 18 months, which is now Isabel's 9-month old, that's when we really hit momentum. And but I burned out because I was working like 7 days a week. I was working 8 hour, like 12-hour days. It was nuts.
Yeah.
And I literally handed my phone and my laptop to a guy in my office. And I told him, listen, I'm going to give you all my database, all my transactions, and we'll go 50-50. And I took off and I went to Paris for 2 months
Wow.
with no phone, no laptop, no nothing, and just
Jeez.
me and my wife and Isabel. She was 9 month old, and we just pushing her in the stroller around Paris, and it was the best day, man. It was the best. I came back, the guy sold everything. He did well. The clients were happy,
Nice.
and that's when I figured out, okay, I can leverage this. I don't need to be in the middle of it. Let me scale this thing.
Mhm.
So I borrowed against the property. I hired a manager. I hired an operation manager. I hired a marketing manager, and I started recruiting, and essentially built a real estate company that went from zero business 18 months ago to about 350 million in sales in 4 years.
Yeah. That's
And
awesome.
yeah, so that was kind of.
Jeez.
But this is around the same time when we're having babies, and we have
Yeah.
2 little babies in the house.
Yeah. That's
So it's
exhausting.
fun.
It's exhausting. So hearing all of this background really helps me out a lot in understanding, because obviously I've seen a lot of the conversations you have and been around a lot talking about dad and dad stuff and different things. So that helps me. It opens up a light a lot into why you talk about the things you do, and where your mindset and thought process comes from on these things. So now I want to definitely dig into the family side of the things, right? So now
Yeah.
you've got 2 kids. What kind of conversations have you and Jen at this point, just now having kids, you're in real estate, States. You come back from a couple months in Paris. Like, what kind of conversations pre and post those like having kids did you have on what your intent was with kids, like what your kind of lifestyle you wanted, how you wanted to raise the kids? What kind of conversations you guys have around that?
Yeah, it's really interesting because we had that conversation our first date.
Nice.
And literally the first date. And the reason why is because my wife was a teacher at the time. And so, and just, like, me, I'm curious. I asked a million questions.
Yep.
So we sat and she was, and I was really curious. I had my ideas about the education system in the United States, but I wasn't in it. So it was interesting to kind of have that conversation with someone who's in it and talking about, how kids are raised. And literally after that conversation, we left that restaurant and we went to another bar, and I was holding her hand. Like, literally, I remember this, thinking that this is the mother of my children on our first date, halfway through the date. And so we kind of I kind of figured that we were aligned, that she was very open-minded. She wasn't stuck to the orthodoxy of, being a part of the teachers union in California. So
thank God she wasn't, right?
Yeah. So she was flexible in terms of her thinking. She was, so we kind of and I knew that I wanted to have kids. I knew that I didn't want, I'm very open-minded, so I didn't want to do it just like everybody else, just because that's how everybody else did it. So again, we started with the whole concept of no one knew anything and just question everything. And so the conversations for us were from day one, and essentially how, where, values, everything, the way we live, everything. All our conversations are around how to think through something, as opposed to just what so and so did so we can do the same thing.
Is Jen from California, like born and raised?
She's multiple generations.
How does one
California
that is born and raised in California, goes to college there, becomes a school teacher there, have unorthodox, indoctrinated views on school and education? How did that happen?
Good question. I'm not sure. I think she never. I think she also felt like her parents didn't really do a great job thinking through, everything they did, throughout their life. So she also had these questions around how she grew up, and her parents stayed together, lived in the same house for 45, 50 years. So, but she always had these questions around, have they done it right? And she always had, So, I found the one person in Southern California.
The only teacher in California who does not get indoctrinated, and you found.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing. At the time when we met, it was like 2011. California was a mess. They were essentially. So now I remember.
Still are.
But I'm talking about in terms of like education, teachers. They were literally every year at the end of the season, they will hand the pink slip to the teachers. Every like at the end of the school year, they literally fire all the teachers, and then the teachers had to reapply for their job the following year. And it was all remaining from that 2008, GFC period, where there's no money, there's no nothing. So literally they would, and I couldn't understand that. I was like, how do you fire a teacher? And I mean, this is like one of the most valuable jobs in society. You know what I mean? It's like, how do you fire a teacher? And coming from where I come from Morocco, we had the saying that the teacher is someone who almost was a prophet. It's like the same level.
Wow.
You know what I mean? It's like that one person who almost became a prophet, who almost was a prophet, or something like that. So it's almost it's so valuable. How do you like treat teachers like that. If you treat teachers like that, how are these teachers going to treat your kids? So that was kind of like part of like, the beginning of the end, essentially for her in terms of like the education system in the United States. And so that's kind of how it went.
Okay. So then, how long did she stay a teacher after having kids?
Oh, as soon as she was pregnant, like I would say probably 3 months before Isabel was born, okay. She quit.
Yeah. All right. Yeah. So you guys definitely had some of those conversations on, no, this is not what we want.
No. Okay. Yeah. I'm totally against, having kids separate from their mother. No, we don't do nannies. We didn't do any, like nothing. So it's just not even family. It's like secure attachments, be there, kids on you. Like I remember, I remember watching kids like hanging, on their mother's back, while they're doing stuff and, cleaning or shopping or whatever, even in the farms. Like I remember seeing, women working in the farm with a kid in the back.
Yeah.
Attached to them.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So,
I remember walking around, like I was in Niger for a while, and that was the same thing there. You see them like constantly. They're working, they're selling their stuff, their kids on their back, with strapped in with the clothing and like hanging out back there, just chilling. Like no complaints in the world.
Yeah.
And it's funny because right now, so I work from home. My wife is still in the military, so she's got 1 year left before she retires. And so by the time our au pair gets off of work, and my wife gets home, it's me and the 3 kids. Well, my 2 older ones, they're pretty self-sufficient. I can tell them to go do something, they go do it. But I've got a 1-year-old little girl, not the most self-sufficient kid in the world. Like she needs a little bit more, right? So here I am, and you're saying that, and that was me all the time. I've got this like little hiking backpack that I used to use for like my oldest is when we first bought it, and now it's gone through 3 kids. But I just toss her in the back of the hiking backpack, and I'm cooking dinner, and I'm taking the dog out, and I'm doing all this stuff in the house. Raquel will come home, and she's like, "What is happening?" And I'm like, I don't know what else I'm supposed to do. I can't chase a 1-year-old around and do all the stuff right now that needs to be done to get ready for dinner. So
I think there's value to that. Human beings don't grow. They don't come out already fully grown. They're still growing outside. I was just watching this video around the teenager brain and how that frontal cortex doesn't develop until in mid-20s.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's crazy. So how do you expect the kid, like the frontal cortex is the part where the decision making, where you hold yourself from doing something stupid, the risk taking, all that stuff is right there and doesn't develop until mid-20s.
Yeah.
So now imagine, so the kids, like the little kids, they're still developing. They're still like want to be attached to their parent. They want to be like, close to their parents. So when you have that separation, it creates this break. And I see it everywhere. I see it in these kids everywhere. So that's kind of like, for me, it was intuitive. It's not like I studied a lot of this stuff. It was just intuitive. It's like, oh, I've seen this before. I don't want, I want kids to be with their mother at home doing their thing. And thank God my wife loves it. She always wanted to be a mom. She always wanted to be, with the kids at home. So it worked out for us.
Yeah, it definitely did work out for you. That's awesome. For me, I love having the kids around. Like, we were talking before I hit record about, my background. So now it's like, that having the kids be able to just, again, come in here if like whenever they get home from Sky Zone, they're going to come in here and probably jump on me and say hello and do the whole, like, and to me, it's like lights up my world. I want them to have the independence to run around, climb trees, fall out of them, get hurt, do their thing, but know that I'm always right here. Know that mom and dad are always here for them. Like, we're always here to support. We're always here to help guide them and teach them. And, which is one of the reasons that I chose to start homeschooling. Like, it was like I want to be there to impact them more. And I know that like you guys homeschool and you guys travel a lot and you guys are doing all sorts of different stuff. So kind of walk me through what it's like in your, like, on a day-to-day basis for you and your kiddos. I know you got, well, I won't say what I already know, but go ahead and tell me what it's like on a day-to-day basis, like a normal Tuesday.
Before going there, just the decision of homeschooling, it wasn't like, even though we were disillusioned about the education system, it was still like, actually, we still made an effort, try to go find education out there. And we're still thinking, maybe private school, maybe move to a really good neighborhood with a really, good demographics that will have a good school. And when we went researching, we really didn't find any difference between the private school and, let's say, the good school in the neighborhood, or even the school that's not in a great neighborhood. Like sometimes the teachers in the not so great schools were even better than the private school. But the only difference were the kids. And then when you look at, even when you zoom in on the kids, even that group of kids that are in that good psychographics, meaning that the parents are on them, that the parents are like, paying attention to them and their behavior and all that stuff. Even then, there's such a big gap, and you still, the teacher is teaching to the lowest denominator, and and then your kids are always held behind, because they have to wait for this other group. And I felt such a waste because, like every kid has its own rhythm. Even my two kids, each one is different than the other. One is fast at certain things and slow at others. And then the other one is fast at other things and slow at some other thing. And one wants to go fast and finish everything. The other one's taking his time, which is okay either way. But, when you think about a class of 20 kids or 30 kids, I'm like, that's going to be crazy to manage. The teacher, there's no way the teacher is going to be able to manage all these different cadences of each kid. And so you can see how kids get bored and just lose focus. And then if you lose focus and fall behind, then they just give up. And you could very quickly, that happens. So,
and then they get labeled as ADHD and pump medicine down their throat. And let's
yeah, exactly. So we decided we're just going to do this homeschooling thing, and then we'll figure it out. And my wife had, a lot of curriculum, and she had a lot of content already from being a teacher. And then, so we decided to do that. So our schedule, like, kids wake up usually at 7. They make their own breakfast. I'm up early. I'm up like an hour or two before them. I do my reading, get my coffee, and then they come in and they hang out with me outside. We sit outside in the backyard and bring their breakfast. And we have this 90-minute ritual 5 days a week. We're off on the weekend, and we sit and we have a conversation. And then every day is a different conversation, a different theme. Today, for example, we had Jack was the first one out, and I asked him, is there any skill, anything that adults do that you always wanted to do, or something some skill that you wanted to have that you don't have? And he sat and he thought about it for a long time, and then he told me, I want to be able to convince people to do what I want them to do. And I'm like, that's interesting. I thought you were going to say fly an airplane or eat 20 hot dogs, but that's a good answer. And I was like, okay, well, that's called influence. And I would start looking. I was thinking about like books around influence, and there's a book called Influence. And I said, maybe I get you that book. But then he's 8, and now that book is thick. And I said, okay, let's go on ChatGPT and find out what the book is about. And then I asked ChatGPT what the book was about, and it said it. And then I said, okay, explain it to an 8-year-old from an 8-year-old perspective, and then explain it for business perspective. Because I asked him why he wanted to, convince people. He says, well, it's more fun, and also I can make a lot of money. And I was like, okay, good answer. So
he is your son for sure.
So ChatGPT answered the question from an 8-year-old for like in the playground or whatever, and then answered it from a business perspective. And so we went through the 6 principles of influence, and I gave them essentially what I do to gain influence from all those 6 things, which was amazing. Like, we spent 90 minutes talking about that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, and you do that, like you said, 5 days a week. Like,
Every
do you
day, yeah.
have like a preset like idea of what it's going to be? Is it based off what you read in that morning? Do you just kind of ask a question and see where it goes?
Yeah. So sometimes I'll just, most of the time, I'll just ask what they're thinking about and what they're excited about. It's usually something that they're going to do that week or next week. So this week they've been excited about their camps. So we talked about a lot about cultures, subcultures within closed environment, the cliques within groups and stuff. So I'm trying to prepare them because the camp is with different kids from different ages and also a lot of kids from school. So I'm trying to get them ready to kind of, because they don't engage with a lot of kids from school. Most of their network is within homeschoolers. And they do engage with school kids, but it's usually not deep enough because they do jujitsu, they do, they play tennis, whatever. So when you do sports, you're just doing the sport. You're really not engaging. But they have this large homeschool group that they hang out with. It's like 60 kids, and they do project, they do science project, they go play in the playground and all that stuff. So they're familiar with that dynamic, but they're not familiar with all the school dynamic. So I was trying to prepare them for that, and that's what kind of like was top of mind for them. But in general, if I see like a really cool video or something on social, I'll send it to myself, and then if something comes up, and I'll show it to them, and then we'll start talking about it, or some article, or sometimes a book. Sometimes I'll give. So Isabel is reading the 1 Minute Manager now. So she's going to come and she's going to tell me about what she learned from the 1 Minute Manager. Nice. She wants to be like a manager, a leader, and she's got that calling. And so she'll come and talk to me about it, and then we'll have like a session, like a whole morning about it. So it's not necessarily it's not organized at all. It's very it's very organic.
Nice. Yeah, and it looks like they have a great time too. I mean, you've shared a couple videos of how the conversations go, and like you can see their brains working and how they're thinking through questions, and to me the ability to get our kids thinking and talking about any subject, period. It really does not matter what the subject is. Like just get them thinking and talking and let their brains start working and watch the magic flow. Like, and some of it's going to be silly. Some of it's going to be like, you may want to like punch yourself in the face, but you're like, no, like their brain is working. I want that moving, Well,
I think it's the concept of thinking about what you're thinking about.
Yeah.
And I think once it clicks for them, and then you really show curiosity as a father, you show curiosity about, I really want to know how you came, not necessarily what you just said, but how you thought through it. Like the steps, how, what went first and what second. And then when you tell them how you think through things, then you kind of have this deeper connection with them. And it takes time. Again, like, most people have a hard time getting the kids to sit and have lunch. So it takes a long time to develop that process. There's going to be some bribing, there's going to be some threatening, there's going to be, you know what I mean? But eventually, you create this habit, and you create this, this habit with them. And then they, after a while, they just like crave it. It's like, oh man, I miss, when I'm not here, the kids call me around the same time. And even when I'm traveling, they call me when they wake up, and then we'll have a conversation. It won't be as long on the phone, but we will have some conversation during that, maybe 15, 20 minutes, and we'll talk about it. They really cool. Miss it. So, but it takes a long time to develop. I started it with just Isabel when she was little. We first started with just Saturdays. Every Saturday I will take her out to a coffee shop when she was 2 or 3, and then we'll just sit her and I, and we'll talk. I mean, when you're talking to a 2-year-old, about anything, just the fact that we're sitting on the table, she's on this side, I'm on this side. And then she's eating your yogurt, and I'm drinking my coffee, and then, I'm talking her ear off, and then she's talking my ear off, and then that's how it started. And then Jack came, and he wanted to join in on the action. He wants to go and get his hot cocoa too, and then that's how it started. And then you earn the hot cocoa by being cool, by sitting in the coffee shop and being cool. Don't be an asshole. Start like screaming or yelling, because if you do that, I'm gonna take you out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you, you know what I mean? If you, and so I think over that period of time, over like over time, you develop that kind of almost like an agreement that
Mhm.
we're going to be, we're going to be civil, we're going to listen, we're going to be cool. There's going to be some rewards. There's going to be some good stuff coming out of it. We're going to have a good time, conversation. And then it evolves over many years into this daily ritual now.
Yeah. Man, that's so much fun. What is your wife involved in any of those conversations, or is that just you for that?
So she's not. She doesn't have to. It's not.
Okay.
It's not required for her. But the kids is. It's like. But so she comes. She pops in once in a while.
Yeah.
But she, again, that she wants her morning meditation and ritual and stuff. So it gives her that freedom in the morning to. It's perfect for her because it frees up her morning. She doesn't have to worry about breakfast. She doesn't have to worry about anybody's coffee or anything. She does her own thing until the kids are ready for school, and then they come to her class. So she doesn't have to. There's no stress in her life in the morning.
Yeah.
She can wake up whenever she wants to wake up. She can read whatever she wants to read, or meditate, or work out, or whatever. And then so that frees her up.
So I kind of want to dig into the question you asked today, or one of the topics you mentioned. I don't think it was about today, but maybe it was the clicks and the different things like coordinating with it. So my oldest is in a little church camp right now. He goes every day for a few hours, and on the drive home yesterday, he was like, "Man, there's one kid in there that's like just really annoying today. Like it was like he was just like." Joking and like laughing too much and like doing silly things. So we had to sit there and talk about, okay, well, sometimes like maybe it started off as just one small thing and somebody laughed and they wanted to turn it into something bigger. Like, how do we know when we're starting to do things that just to impress other people versus because this is naturally ourselves? Like, and like how people interact with each other and the types of groups people get into. So I would love to hear your take on what specifically you were kind of teaching the kids about what's going to be going on in these groups and what to be aware of.
Yeah. Well, so the first thing that I like to have them do is just get in the habit of observing behavior. And just develop that pattern recognition of behavior, because once they start doing that, they're gonna notice that those profiles start repeating themselves, and then you start seeing the same pattern with certain people. There's just certain people that are just bullies. There's just people that are like like to do bad stuff, and then there's some people that are like very talkative, and there's just some people that are like very strong-willed and wanna control the group, and then there's some people that are very chill, laid back, free spirits, and then there's some people that are like jokesters, but they're like mean well. And then there's just people that are, you know what I mean? So just observe, like that's the one thing that I want them to do. Just observe people, so you can notice the patterns and you notice the differences and recognize who is what. And then the way I tell them to think about it is just like when we sit outside and we watch these birds, we watch these little, critters, lizards, things happening. They're different species. And that's how human beings, like all these different personality profiles, are just different species. They are who they are. There's nothing good or bad or about them. They are who they are. So you have to accept them the way they are. Now, when you accept the bully as a bully, the bully has a function in life. The same way, like an alligator, has a function in the environment. So every profile has a job in the environment. And now, number one is you recognize it, you accept it for what it is. You're not upset by the fact that they are who they are. You can't, that's silly. Why would you be upset at an alligator for being an alligator, or a snake to be a snake? So you just accept that. And then you navigate, you go toward the people that you want to hang out with. So when you try to develop your group of friends, you have to have like a vision, a goal. What kind of friends do I want? That's why, the fact that we moved a lot. We moved from within California, we moved a lot, and then we moved to Hawaii, and then from Hawaii to South Florida. Jen and I have been married for 12 years. We moved like 6 times. And so my kids were challenged by having to rebuild their networks. And the last time, the hardest one was when we were in Hawaii, because it's completely different, culture, subculture. So they were challenged. So they were kind of upset. I can see their little sadness, when we were there. And I'm like, what's the problem? And he's like, oh, we missed our friends. And lucky for us, their 2 best friends that live next to us in California also moved overseas. So thank God they couldn't blame me. It was like, even if we stayed, they wouldn't have been there. So I explained to them, it's like, what is it that you miss? So it's like, we miss our friends. Okay, so you miss the connection. You miss having connection with friends. Yes, great. Now, what do we want? Well, we want friends that we have connection with. Great. What kind of friends do we want? Well, my kids was like, I don't know. And so this is at a time where Jack was 4, Isabel was 6. So like they're telling me, well, I don't know. I was like, okay, well, do you want good friend, bad friend? Good friend. Do you want funny or boring? Funny. You want active or inactive? Do you want kids who like the things you like or don't like anything you like? So we created this ideal friend profile, and literally we wrote it down for each kid. Jack has his own, Isabel has her own. Now that we created this ideal friend profile, now where are we going to find him? There's playgrounds, gyms, trampoline places, whatever. And then how do we qualify the kids in these places to match them with the ideal profile? Well, I don't know. The kids are like, I don't know. It's like, okay, well, you ask questions. What questions do I ask? And it's like, okay, hi, my name is Jack. I'm 4. How old are you? I like jiu-jitsu. What do you like? I watch Garfield. What do you watch? I live in Colina. Where do you live? You know what I mean? Just simple questions. And if the kid within the first couple questions is looking you in the eye and smiling, that's probably a good profile. If they're like distracted and that doesn't even know his name or doesn't even know how old he is, move on. Yeah. And then now that you identified 1 or 2 in that playground that are good, what do you do? Well, you got to get their information. We talked about funnels earlier. You got to get the email and phone number. And he said, he's like, well, how do I do that? You got to make an offer. Well, what are you talking about? I was like, well, there's a mom and dad nearby. Yes, great. You're going to go say, hi, my name is Jack. I'm 4-year-old. I'd like to invite Joey over here to a pizza party or to my birthday. What's a good phone number? And literally they had so we scripted this. We role played it. And then they had a quota of 2 numbers a week. So they had like a goal that they had to hit. So 2 phone numbers a week. And I can tell you, dude, within 6 weeks, they had 25 friends.
Wow.
Like our house became the hub for all the kids within 6 weeks of arriving there. And then now when you have 20 kids outside your house, what happens? They attract like 20 other kids.
Yeah, no
because
kidding.
That becomes the place. You know what I mean? So the whole time we were in Hawaii, we had like kids in front of our house every day. Just from that exercise. And so it started out with actually knowing what you're looking for, accepting people who they are, and then just, iterate. Oh, I had this friend, it was great at first, and then it sucked later. So let's go find, how do we iterate? What do we do? How do we change it? How do we change it? How do we change it? And I remember this, I tell the kids about Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett a lot. And so Warren Buffett has this thing around, the best way to kind of like build a network is to be lazy about it, where he enters a group of 100 people, he'll have a conversation with all 100. He can tell very quickly the top 5 high quality people, and he can tell very quickly the bottom 5 lowest quality people, but he has no idea the 90 in the middle, who they are, and he treats the 90 the same way he treats the bottom 5. So he moves on. So he keeps the top 5 and then moves on to another room with 100 people. And over time, that high quality group just compounds because those 5 attracts other 5. And then now he built like a high quality network. And so I teach the kids the same thing. It's like, you don't need to you don't need to change people. You don't need to fix people. You don't need to try to force yourself in a group. You can create your own group. You can enter high quality groups. You have all the options available to you. So if someone is bothering you, you don't have to be bothered by them. They are who they are.
Yeah.
And then, but if someone puts your hand on you, then all bets are off.
Yeah.
And so, I tell you the whole thing about bullies. So my kids know that if someone puts your hand on you, if someone try to harm you, whatever, they have full authority to destroy. So my kids had problem. My kids go to jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, martial arts. Since they were little, I let them, hit me as hard as they can. So they're used to hitting people hard. Like my uncle, they played with him once in a while in the pool, and they destroy him. Like he goes to the chiropractor every time, and every time, and so they hit hard. But sometimes they have problem. When they get bullied, they have a problem harming someone because they want to be good kids. They don't want to get in trouble with the instructor. They don't want to get in trouble with the teacher, or they don't want to get in trouble in the neighborhood with the HOA or something. And so I have to push them that if someone is, try to bully you, try to harm you, you gotta not only defend yourself, but you gotta destroy it. So they don't ever come near you or come near your friends. And so I had to literally bribe them. I had to number one, write a letter explaining that I take responsibility for everything. Give them money in case I get a complaint. It's if I get a complaint from your teacher, you get $50. If you get an ambulance call, you get $100. So
wow.
Just the fact that they were oh my God, I'm gonna make $100. Crushing somebody. Now they're leaning in. And then just by leaning in, the bully pulls back.
Oh yeah.
And that's it. And then they never had problems with bullies ever again, because they knew that if they were willing to stand up for themselves, and because the bully can think, if kids trying not to avoid a fight, sometimes they think that they're scared. So the bully moves, steps in. But if you're not scared and you step in, he's like, listen, dude, I'm a machine. I will take you down. Yeah. They're not going to mess with you. They're going to go pick on someone else. And so it was interesting kind of to see that mindset shift in their head. But yeah, again, just knowing the type of people that fit with it for you, that work. Number one, learn to recognize people. Yeah. Have that pattern recognition. Understand the people that fit with you and your personality and your values. And then just have a process how to acquire those friends. Yeah. Just like we acquire customers or acquire talent in our life, the same way, have a process on how to acquire those friends. And then if you have that process, you could, they're unstoppable. They can, they feel confident. They can make friends anywhere, anytime, parachuted anywhere. They can build a network.
For sure. And I mean, and that goes well beyond just having friends. And I talk to people all the time about you are the 5 people you hang around with most. You need to be intentional about those 5 people. I was telling my wife that we need to be extremely intentional about our kids, especially now that we're homeschooling. It's I think it was important before, obviously, when they were forced to be around all of these kids, to help them choose the right people to be around, the ones who do light them up instead of tear them down. And now it's okay, not only do we need to know that they know how to pick those people out, but we have to put in the effort as ourselves to find people that meet these parameters as well. Because it's not like my kid's just going to be in a class of 20 people and go find his 5 people, I got to go find them. So I'm in the middle literally right now of messaging people hey, I want to start doing little mini cohorts next school year at my house with other 5th graders my son's age that want to do things and get together. And, I want them to be Christians and I want their families to be entrepreneurial minded, right? Because those are the type of people I want to surround surround around my kids, right? And if their kids and families are going to be coming to my house, I want to know that I can appreciate who their parents are too, because that's where a majority of that influence is going to be with those kids. So yeah,
absolutely. And the tricky thing is kids are growing so fast at a certain age, at this age. So their friends because their friends are going to be exposed to different things. They're going to be have their own experience at home, and they're also growing. They're changing. So one of the challenges for me, and I try to keep conscious about it, is that we talk about their friends all the time because I want to know the conversations that are happening.
Yeah.
And so I don't be like, without me, attending their get-togethers, I can tell, who's doing what and who's, you know what I mean? Because they tell me stuff all the time. So I'm I'm following what's going on with them as a group. So I can tell when one of the kids is starting to go this way, or one of the kids start going this way, or whatever. And I'm trying to kind of like explain to the kids how to think through that, and how to think, and when to, pull back, and when to not engage, and when to, and then also the process of always be closing, always be looking for friends is so powerful, because like sometimes, kids get into a routine where they have this little group, and then they feel like they have to hold on to that. They don't want to lose, that one or two, because they feel like if they lose it, they're not going to have any. But like, no, dude, there's plenty of people out there.
Yeah.
And that's why, I went through that exercise of like how to create your wolf pack, and, how many people in the world, how many people in our 2-county area, how many people fit your box, and how many people can you engage with every, once a year? What's your capacity to make friends? And then of those friends, how many can you convert into actual friends? And then of those friends, how many of them, their mom likes our mom? You remember that point?
Yeah.
And then at the end, you got this small number. We go from 8 billion to like 6.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you got to go through this process, because in the middle, the only thing that you control is your activities, how many people you make contact with. And that middle is like, for them, is like, we said, okay, 100. That's kind of like, we just made a random number. That's how many people you're going to make contact with a year. So that's the only number you control. So if you can just keep making contacts, you're going to be able to, at the end of the year, to come up anywhere between 4 or 5 people. And then you're probably going to lose half or less. So you're constantly kind of having this funnel of like, for your wolf pack. And
we also just talked about how to market for a company as well,
yes.
like how to narrow in your customer, right? So,
yes, exactly. Yeah. Like literally it's the same process.
Yeah, it sure is.
We talk about also having a CRM. So when you acquire, so they have their own spreadsheets. I'm going to put them on HubSpot soon, but they have like their spreadsheets of all their friends, and all like their age, their address, their email, their what their preferences and all that stuff. And their goal is to essentially every day go in, see whose birthday is who, call them, wish them a happy birthday, add them to the, send them a gift or a postcard or whatever. Put them on the list for the Christmas card, put them on the list for the pizza party. If they're local, if they're not local, check on them, do a Zoom call with them, blah, blah, blah. Like they have like literally a system to stay in touch, with their sphere or their list, and to keep it alive and keep it nurtured, because and then we always talk about like they meet good people all the time, but they forget to capture the phone number or email. It's like, oh man, I wish I got the number. So like every time they come from somewhere, I ask them, it's like, oh, who did you meet? Did you get their number? Did you get their email? Whatever. So it's an ongoing process that it takes a while for them to kind of like get used to.
That is really cool. I like that idea a lot. Like that's something that even me, I'm miserable at it. So like, for my personal stuff, right? As a company, my company does good at that type of thing, but I personally do a terrible job at it. Like, I grew up bouncing around all over the place as a military brat, and then went into the military and bounced around all over the place. So there's like a handful of people that I still keep in contact with rather regularly. Other than that, it's like, I don't know, there's a bajillion people that I've missed out on the relationships now. Like, I could see them tomorrow, and we can go be best friends and have a great time, and then never see each other again for the next 10 years. But it's like, man, I wish I was more intentional. And by saying that, it means that I should take action on it. But be more intentional.
Well, imagine if you had that list. Imagine if you had that list up till today, and people that you've known for 30, 40 years. It's nuts.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
I mean, we're constantly spending effort and time and money acquiring new relationships when, and we just like let the ones that we have kind of like whittle away. So,
Yeah.
so just, having the kids think about it as early as possible is so powerful because it kind of like just, it just codes in their brain as early as possible. And it's great. We talk about like the whole thing about influence. Part of one of the principles of influence is reciprocity, and the whole aspect of like, oh, if I give someone a gift, they feel like they want to give me back, or if I do someone a favor, they want to do a favor back. And we go through this process of like, how can you add value? Essentially, you just try to add value to people. How can you add value to people? The easiest thing is like, oh, you have a friend. How about introduce him to this friend? Bring him into your game. How about, you invite him to, to jump in our pool and come and hang out with us at, in our house, or come to our pizza party, or come to this, so the more of these things you add, if you go travel overseas, bring them a little gift, or if you have a toy that they think they're going to like, give it to them or whatever. The more you give, the more you get. And you gain influence within your group. You become a leader within your group. You're the connector of your group. And we learn this stuff like too late sometimes.
Yeah. So I'll tell you one thing that I personally struggle with on that front is, and it makes it hard for me to kind of teach the kids. So I'd love to kind of hear how mentally you work through it. So in a previous life, I used to like handle sources and do various different things for law enforcement and counterintelligence stuff, right? So I would have those databases of all the people and all the stuff, but it was used to borderline use the person, right? And in some cases, no, like, I mean, we're going after true bad guys, and it's not really using the person, but in a way, they were a tool for me. I wanted them to feel connected to me, but I mean, I'm not going to go have a beer with them unless it's for work. You know what I mean? So mentally for me now, I struggle with like, am I doing this just to, like, I know I need to write all this stuff down so I can stay connected with people and be able to do these things, but am I doing it just for work? Like, how do you keep the genuine desire for friendship there versus the, I'm doing this like as part of what I know I need to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like, it's very similar to what we talked about earlier. Like when you're focused on your ideal, profile, your ideal connection, your ideal, if you develop a network of high quality people in your life's going to be richer. Your kids' life's going to be richer. It's going to create, not only it's going to create a really good feeling, good serotonin, because you have all these friends and you can enjoy being around them, and also you can help each other. So I think there's a higher, a higher goal behind building relationships, building network. Not only for yourself but also for your kids. The same way, like the money is a currency, relationships are a currency. That could be the leverage. So there are a lot of layers to the value of being in a relationship with people and staying in a relationship with people. And if you're focused on that high quality quadrant, and yes, there's going to be an A and a B, if you will, and I keep my connection to the A's strong, and I stay in touch with the B's, I think I'm okay. And if I can teach that to my kids, and I can create opportunities for my friends, for my family, and for my kids, absolutely. I think it's the same mechanics of the job or the business exist here, but the emotional piece or the intent behind it is different.
Yeah, and I guess the emotional side is always the hard part for me, because I have like one emotion, and it's just for my family. Like that's the only one that I find, really. I bury all the other ones. So, but having that connection is important.
So I'll channel that. Yeah, absolutely. So I'll channel that emotion because for my family, I need to do this.
Yeah.
I need to create a network for my kids. I need to create opportunities for my kids. I need to create contacts, a high quality contact list for my kids. I mean, like the easiest way to get kids opportunities, whether it is job or getting into a college or seeing the best surgeon or seeing this, is to have the one person you know that has access to those things. You know what I mean? So I'm doing this to create access. It's the highest leverage. That, to me, there are contexts that cannot be created with money. You can have the money but not have access.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But building a relationship where we talk about the six levels of connection, or six separations, whatever. And I think in our world, it's probably less than that. It's like three of them. You have three levels of separation from anybody in the world. So why not build that for that legacy for our children, for our family?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's a. I had to write a note while you're talking about that. It's like, what do I provide to the person? Because it's, one of the things that I am always doing, or always used to do in my other life, is it's what can that person provide for me, which is mentally where I always struggle. I'm like, I don't want that to be the genesis of my relationship, is trying to figure out what that person can provide for me. And, you already hit on it before, of like giving to people, give to people, which I love doing. Like, I absolutely, it's one of my favorite things in the world to do is give. And watching their faces with zero expectation of getting anything in return. But yet, for some reason, when I look at relationships, I don't look at it that way. I don't look at it as like I give to people I know, give to people I don't know. But so I appreciate it. I'm working on that. That helped me out a lot in kind of working through some of my mental thoughts about it, because it's made it harder for me to even communicate that to my kids, because I don't do it well myself. So it's hard for me to communicate to the kids. So I greatly appreciate that.
Absolutely. Sometimes it doesn't really take much. Sometimes it's just like having a conversation or listening to somebody, or, spending time with them and connecting. You never know. Like, there's some things that you do well in your life that you can help someone else, on that side of their life. And sometimes giving them the opportunity to help you, because they want to, contribute. That helps, they get the joy out of that. So, it's fun.
I'm looking forward to playing around with that now. And then when my kids get back, I'll let them know, like, because I give them a hard time all the time. I'm like, dude, you were hanging out with this homeschool group. You told me about one of these kids. Like, did you get their number? Did you talk to them at all? Nope.
Yeah.
Not like, did you, like, what level of connection did you try to get with? Like, would you like them to come to the house and play in the pool with you? Yeah. Well, how are they supposed to get in touch with you? You know, like, you gotta be able to go do these things. But my oldest is getting better with it.
It's like literally a constant reminder, and then a constant role play. Like, before they go, I'm like, all right, let's go. Role play with me. Hi, my name is Jack. I'm 8. How old are you? I live here. Where do you live? I like to play this. What do you play? I go to, I don't, where do you go to school? I do this. What do you do? So it's an ongoing exercise. And actually, there's a really good book. It's very thin. It's a fiction called Go for No, and essentially teaches people, like, I used to give it to all my sales guys, and it just teaches people to not worry about the outcome, and then just go and make a touch, have a conversation. And the idea is that most people there's a graphic in there. It's very simple. Most people think of success over here and failure over here. And so they're trying to run away. They're in the middle, and they're running away from failure, going towards success. So that's how they think. I'm going to run away from failure towards success. But the way things work is that you run through failure to get to success. So you have to you have to do something, fail a lot, and then get to success. Because if you're trying to avoid failure, you're never going to try anything, and then you're never going to make it to success. So it's the same thing in the relationships, is that you have to put yourself out there. You have to get rejected. You have to, you have to get through failure in order for you to get. So a lot of times kids don't ask the questions, don't ask because it feels like, oh, I may get rejected. And so I'm just going to go with what's coming easy, which is you're playing over here, I'm playing over here, and then all of a sudden we're playing together.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then I'll go,
Yeah.
that's easy. We don't have to talk. And like my son used to say this to me all the time. It's like I say, what do you guys talk about? He says, Dad, kids don't talk. Adults talk, kids play. And so I had to like, so it's like adults talk, kids play. And I'm like, no, dude. You talk
Everybody
first
talks.
and then
Yes.
play.
That's funny.
So I think that's kind of like the part that it's a constant exercise. And then when you find opportunities when, Isabel was telling me last time, man, I wish I got the phone number from that girl because she was really cool. And I miss, I feel bad not having staying in contact with her. That kind of like now she's learning that lesson. She's having her failure as early as possible. Now she's going to remember that. And then she's going to like next time she's going to make sure that we talk about it. It's like, listen, the first 2 days, like for example, they're going to camp next week. Monday, Tuesday is the first 2 days. You need to talk to as many people as you can. So when you talk to somebody, as soon as you find out they're cool, you got to say, okay, Johnny, I really like you. I'm going to go talk to this person and I'm going to come back. Is that okay? Yes. Great. And then go talk to the other person. I need you to move around the room. I don't want you to be stuck with Johnny for 3 days because you're stuck with Johnny for 3 days. You're not going to meet all the other 50 kids. So I want you to, the first 2 days, I want like the rundown on all the kids. If you don't do that, you're not going the third day. I can tell you, it's just a waste. Yeah. We're just wasting money here. Like I tell, like they know I'm serious. so they know I'm serious. If they don't get the contact info, they're not going back.
That's funny. That's awesome. So
the first 2 days they got to get the list, and then they can have fun. I don't care after that.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a load of sense, And I wish that I would have had this conversation with you last week before my son was at camp all this week. So really appreciate that, But,
well,
I'll force him to do that today. Today's the last day, so we'll see how it goes. But come home with a phone number, buddy. Come home with a phone number.
You got to bribe him with the next camp or the next thing. That's for sure. That's the thing.
Yeah, there's a homeschool spy camp where they're doing some different things. So I'll have to use that as he told me last night he wanted to do it. So I'm like, all right, well, you got to come back with a friend phone number before I get to the spy camp.
Information.
Yeah. That's right. Exactly. Exactly.
Intelligence.
Yep, I love it. But hey, tell me, as we're getting ready to kind of wrap up, tell me, is there anything that's been on your mind, like you really wanted to hit, anything that came up while we were chatting that you wanted to come back to, or anything that is kind of what's burning on your brain right now?
No, I think this is a dad's podcast, so I would say majority of dads or parents in general, they essentially majority of them do what either they do the same thing that their parents did, or they do the opposite. The opposite. So they're either going toward it or away from it. And I would just, invite people to think differently, and then start from first principles and just think, okay, what do I want to achieve with my kids? Like at the base thing of it, what do I want to achieve with my kids? If I what would success look like? And so that's super important, because most parents don't know that. And then so they do a lot of things and they hope that whatever sticks to the wall, that's going to be our thing. And unfortunately, they may do well in one side, but then they fail at other things. And for me, I need like a holistic approach. I need the kid to be complete from all different sides. And at this age, between 4 and 12 is like the best time to mold the kids in a way that to create that. So you have this 8 years, maybe 10, where you can create those things. And for me, I want my kids to be productive. I want them to be so productive, meaning self-sufficient. They're contributing positively to society. So that's one. Number two, I want them resilient, capable of overcoming challenges and tough. I want them to be curious, constantly learning, that growth mindset. and I want them to be responsible. And by responsible, I mean that they recognize that they're in charge of their own happiness. It's not outside. Nothing's happening outside of them. Everything is happening inside of them. Like anything they want in life is within them, and they can generate their own happiness. They can, manifest their own future. They can do all the things they want to do. It's all an inside game. So, if they got those 4 things, they're good. They're gonna be, you know what I mean? Most people do well with 1. But if they got those 4, if they're looking to be productive, they're tough, they're curious, and they take responsibility for their life, happiness, and future, I think that they're going to be okay.
Man, that was
and everything we talk about, like from like my kid's perspective, everything we talk about is from like the 3 frameworks. So anything we do, if we put goals, like if we're setting goals or we're setting like vision boards, everything is happening from health, wealth, and relationships. So we want, health, our health to be at peak level, meaning I got to eat well, I got to sleep well, I got to drink water, I got to keep my mind clear of nonsense and have a clear mind, positive thoughts. From wealth perspective, I want to learn skills. Like right now, the way they're going to build wealth is by developing skills. So whether it is, playing with like learn how to code, or learn, what is that software to do graphics and stuff? What is the graphics software that's online right now? Canva.
Online, you said Canva?
Canva, yeah. So learn how to use Canva, learn how to code, learn how to sell, learn how to make stuff, 3D print, all kinds of stuff. Those are all skills that they can develop, that they can generate money with, and or to generate wealth with. Learn how much to spend versus how much you're making, keeping your expenses low, generating more than you can consume. Don't consume too much. Invest in assets. Don't buy liabilities. All this knowledge around wealth. So right now, just developing that knowledge. And then the last one is a relationship, and that's what we spend a lot of time on, is building a relationship, keeping those high quality, acquiring and retaining high quality relationships. Yeah.
No, I love that. It's I love the 3 frameworks to look at it: health, wealth, relationships. Those being productive, resilient, curious, responsible. Having you could tell that you clearly think about how you want to raise your kids. Yeah. And, as one thing I talk to people about is the same thing that you just kind of alluded to at the beginning of this. You either run away from what your parents did, or you run towards what your parents did. And a lot of times it's subconsciously. You don't even know that you're doing it. You don't realize that you're doing the exact opposite that your parents did, right? Which is why I like to talk about everybody's parents, like at the beginning of the podcast, because it gives us an opening into what they do. And I don't care necessarily, and it sounds like you don't either, if they're running away from what their parents did or if they're running towards what their parents did, as long as they've thought about why and they're moving in the right direction on purpose. It's when you're doing it just because that's, that it's the innate thing for you to do, that's when it's a problem, because then you're teaching your kid to do the same thing. And if all you're doing is going through life because that's just the way that you felt like you should be moving, well, that's not the way to, like, it's not about feelings. It's not about it's like, there's got to be logic and decision making and purpose behind what you're doing. And even raising kids, by far, too many kids are raised on autopilot, and it drives me bonkers.
Yeah. And following up on that is, like, when a lot of people talk about legacy, talking about, transfer of wealth or transfer of stuff, and they think of the material, the money, they think of a lot of that stuff. Yeah. And really none of it matters. What really matters is that transfer of wisdom, the transfer of insight, the transfer of, like I'm this cell that came out of 2 other cells. I'm a piece of DNA. I think of myself as a code of DNA that came from my parents, right? And then I have my experience, and I crossed oceans, and I learned so much, and I did all this stuff to get here, right? And I'm trying to transition that code within me to my kids.
Yeah.
So it's almost like I'm trying to plug my, like something to my hard drive to them so they can transfer all that stuff, all that wisdom, all that insight. And so I need to transfer the good stuff, not the bad stuff. So I got to keep the viruses over here. I got to keep the nonsense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm trying to transfer the good stuff, not the bad. So I need to know for myself what's good, what's bad.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then put that on a separate folder in my brain, and then copy paste that folder. Make sure that it doesn't have any viruses in it.
Yeah, and I love the analogy. And you're transferring an upgraded version of the code, to a much younger, stronger machine, right?
Yes.
Like you're taking 44 years of code, and transferring it into an 8 and a 10-year-old, and imagine now when they're at 44, the amount of code that is going to be built inside of their brain. Like the machine's going to be unstoppable.
I'm alive to see it.
Oh, no kidding. I'm in the same boat. I can't wait to see my kids raise kids, just to see the transition from, where my parents came from that allowed me to be where I'm at, and where I'm at that's going to allow my kids to be where they're at, and now what they're going to do with their kids, and I just hope we don't do the shirt sleeves thing in 3 generations where everything is lost. I don't want that. I want it to constantly be an upgraded code. And how do I do that? I'm hoping that I'm working on it, right? And the engagement that I have with my kids, and the the teaching that we have, and the sitting down, purposeful conversations that I wish we had more of. Those are the things I'm hoping are the ones that keep, because again, transfer of wisdom and insight is way more important than the transfer of wealth. If I just transfer wealth to them, then that's going to be burned. It's going to be gone. But if I transfer wisdom and insight,
here's the biggest thing that a lot of people miss is that transfer only works if you have connection. And a lot of people don't have connection. A lot of people don't spend enough time to have deep connection. So you really have to have deep connection. You have to have that cable has to be big and thick, and transfers really well. So it doesn't lose the data on the way. You don't want to have those cheap, buy at 7-Eleven type cables. You want to buy the original brand, So that connection has to be strong, and that's where that time together, that not that we're in the same room at the same time, or not I'm I hear a lot of guys will say, I spend a lot of time with my kids. I just took them to this thing, or I just took them to that thing, or I just went to this mini golf, or we just played this. And no, none of that. Just be able to sit in silence in a place and just be with each other, and not be distracted by games, not be distracted by TV, not be distracted by some entertainment, some dopamine rush that coming from trampolines or whatever. That's not connection. Connection is when you literally sit and then you just be with each other and having relationships, or you're just not talking at all, just sitting and connect, your kid on you, sitting on you, and then just observing the birds. You know what I mean? That's what connection. That's where you strengthen that connection. So if you sit with your kid for an hour, or sit your kid on you and then just observing birds for an hour, I can tell you that kid's gonna absorb anything you tell him.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and that's, I struggle with that personally, because I hate just sitting doing nothing. It drives me bonkers. But and that's one of those that a mindset shift is. That's not sitting doing nothing. That's sitting building a true connection, a true a something that I wouldn't get otherwise.
Yes.
And I also, my 2 boys, that's all they want to do is jump around and play and dive and do things too. So it's we're all on that same page. But I love the mindset shift in that, and the thought behind just sitting still with each other is extremely important. Is kind of where you need to be. So I love that. But Jay, we are going to have to do a 2.0 version of this for sure, because there's so much more that we did not touch at all that I know that we'd love to get into. And it's funny, as I thought to myself as you were talking, I was like, boy, I'd love to get you and Adrian on a call together, and just the 3 of us just hammer out a bunch of dad stuff, because you two are so intentional about what you're doing and building something for your kids, and growing what the helping them grow into the types of adults that you want them to be and the type of adult that they want to be, right? That they're intentionally growing, that you guys are intentionally interacting with your kids in a way that is just unbelievably authentic and awesome. So I appreciate you, and I thank you for sharing that with us, sharing that with me. I look forward to all the things that I steal from you as we continue to do all of this. So, but thank you so much, Jay. If people wanted to reach out to you, maybe they've got a small business they want to sell, or maybe they're just like, man, this guy's an awesome dad, and I need to say something to him. So
my name is very unique, so I'm easy to find anywhere on social media. So Jay Bourgana, Jay Bourgana at Gmail. That's my email. So easy.
Awesome. All right. We'll have everything in the show notes. So again, thank you so much, Jay. Thank you, everybody who is listening. Please like, subscribe, comment, do all of that stuff. And we'll see everybody on the next show.